continuing our conversation now with Marcus Miller. And Marcus, first of all, hats off to you, because one of the things that you're doing, whether you know it or not, is getting rid of a stereotype that we can play music, but we couldn't possibly be that smart mathematically. And yet the two are so interconnected that it's not even funny. So
Right.
when you start talking mathematics to your audience, what happens?
Right. Well, so when you talk about mathematics to people, a few things happen. If they're already very curious about mathematics, they get really excited because they're like, oh, there's somebody else in my tribe. This is not a conversation I can have with everybody. So
It's okay to be a nerd. Yeah.
Right. If you know, if that's your interest, but then there's some people who immediately their eyes glaze over, they check out, and I think there are a lot of reasons for this. And in kind of speaking about mathematics to a general audience, I've found ways to kind of counteract what this is. I think part of it is that what happens, I think, in American education system is that people equate mathematics somehow with their fundamental level of intelligence. And if they feel like they're not good at math, it feels like the world is telling them that they're dumb, which is not necessarily true at all. It might not be true that they're not good at mathematics. And this usually happens around, well, for me, it was like 6th grade, 7th grade, when numbers turned into letters. That's usually when people start to get nervous. But one, it doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb, and two, it doesn't necessarily mean you're bad at math, right? It could be that the way that the system is written down or taught isn't inviting. And so when you say, well, all right, what is the potential here? What kind of questions can you think about? How can you be engaged? And you kind of start from there, and you start from concepts of, well, symmetry. Symmetry is beautiful. Symmetry appears in art and music. When you talk about transcendent beauty, when you talk about learning potential, when you talk about music or culture, these are things that people latch onto. And when they see that there's math inside, they're a little bit more prone to, listening for maybe 10 more seconds. And then if you use humor, or if you use live music or things like this, then you can kind of hold their interest, and they'll be compelled. It's certainly still kind of a niche field, and high level math isn't going to interest everybody, just like, everybody isn't going to be a fly fisher, or everybody isn't going to be a painter or something like that. But you definitely get a lot more people than you would if you did everything by rote and kind of in the boxy linear way that math is talked about now.
We're going to play your song. This is a song that you wrote, that you performed during your webinar. So let's take a listen. I want you to explain this, which is that when you're talking about mathematics, when you're talking about speech, when you're talking about rhythm, mathematics plays a role in ways that people don't even understand. Especially, for instance, a comedian. A comedian with no sense of timing is a failure.
Right.
An artist with no sense of timing is a failure. Is it the same in the world that you live in, where you're not just a mathematician, but also a saxophonist?
Yeah, so you definitely need a sense of timing, and you definitely need a sense of, the other thing you need to do, both math and music, is a sense of, I think, to do it well and to understand yourself in it, is a sense of history and tradition, right? And so, for instance, the piece that was played is a classical piece inspired by the work of Johann Sebastian Bach, and based on the theme of Erykah Badu. If you take the first few notes of On and On, one of her famous songs, I took that and then wrote it in a prelude format using the Baroque counterpoint.
And before you go further, this may be the first and last time that we hear Johann Sebastian Bach and Erykah Badu mentioned in the same sentence.
and that's a travesty, because it's all music, it's all sound, it's all culture, it's all beautiful, it's all in this historical lineage. And that's kind of the point, is that, when, for me, I wanted to go learn classical music, classical harmony. One day I just was listening to Chopin, and I'm like, I really love this, but as a jazz musician, I don't know how to process this. So I went and studied with somebody who was an expert in Bach and expert in the classical tradition. And what it did is it broadened my relationship to sound, and it broadened my relationship to time and harmony. And with all of these things, as your relationship broadens, what happens in me, they're like overlapping bubbles in my mind. And you know, at first something might be disconnected and far away from another subject. So harmony and mathematics, yeah, no, maybe people say they're connected, but I don't understand it. But then as my knowledge of harmony expands and my knowledge of mathematics expands, they begin to overlap. And this in between is something that is uniquely me. It's honest. It comes from me as a creative person. And that's how I can write something like that. And for me, at least, it doesn't feel contrived, or it doesn't feel like, well, this is a gimmick. It's like, no, this is what I'm hearing. And from both of these traditions, really all three, the classical, the kind of jazz, modern jazz and R&B, and the mathematical tradition, they all kind of integrate seamlessly in a way that this is just me being natural, not me trying to put on.
Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want you to talk to that young kid that's watching this interview right now that says, that's me. And I want you to talk to him about your difficulties, your successes, and your failures. So we'll be right back.